this has been clarified multiple times that it is not, they are not calling it mother tongue. They are saying the home language, whatever language you use at home. Many families today use English, for example, as a home language. So for them, it is always going to be the English language. There are, two different things. And unfortunately, in all our communities, we tend to be mixing up different things. One is, education in English is one thing, and learning English is another thing. I think they are not calling it a mother tongue. They are actually calling it whatever language you use at home is the language in which you want to be educated, so that you don't the children, the cognitive abilities and all of that can be better utilized, and the children can be better prepared if they are taught in the language which they use at home. I think that is how government has been saying that. I don't think it has ever been the mother tongue or the which state you are, that particular language. That imposition for a diverse country like India is not going to work. I think already the south and north, there are murmurs of protests now. So I don't think anybody can ever impose that you must be educated in mother tongue until certain standard kind of thing. I don't think any government would ever say that. It's also not implementable. It's not practically possible. One of the biggest challenges with higher education in India, for whatever reason, it became that way, is a very highly fragmented higher education system. For every sector, you have their own institutions. Now, for agriculture, if you take Indian Council for Agricultural Research, they have a set of laboratories in the agricultural space, and ICAR funds agricultural laboratories. So agriculture is one sector. You take the case of medicine, Indian Council for Medical Research, they have their own institutions, they found their own research. You take the case of IIMs, entirely exclusively focused on management education. You take the case of IITs, engineering. You take the case of ICES, sciences. I think this fragmented education system is our biggest challenge right now. So now, whereas if you look at a problem, let us say the problem is you want to double the farmer's income. That is what government of India has been saying. Now, if you want to double the farmer's income, who will do that? Agricultural labs have scientists. They work in the science-related areas more than the engineering-related areas. Unless engineers join hands with agricultural scientists, you will never be able to deliver these precision agriculture or sensors kind of technologies to the farmers. Now, for that, IITs need to work very closely with the agricultural laboratories in the country. ICAR needs to open up, and ICAR needs to start funding IITs in a massive way, bring all these institutions together. That is one big challenge. You take the case of healthcare, the medical related technologies. Again, IITs need to work closely with the hospitals, All India Institutes of Medical Sciences, to be able to develop any of these technologies. Now, if you want to apply artificial intelligence, machine intelligence kind of technologies to healthcare, who is going to apply them? The doctors don't work in AI, ML areas. That is again where the computer science departments in IITs need to work very closely with the medical doctors. So therefore, this fragmented education system is our biggest challenge right now. So what the new education policy proposes is more multidisciplinary kind of institution, where IITs also, if they have medical schools, for example, then the engineers, doctors working together, you can come up with a lot of innovation. If you are not able to do that, at least AIIMS and IITs working very closely under one umbrella can also help boost that innovation in the healthcare sector. So I think that is what the education policy is saying, and to me that is a very great thing. Right now, if you look at IITs, we charge some fee, just about 10% of or 20% of what is the actual cost of education at the undergraduate level. But you go to masters, you go to PhD streams, students are paid a scholarship. No student would do a master's or PhD without getting a scholarship from one of the government sources. Now, is it possible to scale that? Now, if you are suddenly trying to double this number, does government have enough money to support so many more students? If that is not the case, what is an alternative model? What is a financial model that we can come up with which doesn't burden students and at the same time we don't become entirely dependent on the government of India for the funds. That calls for a lot of new financial models to be put in place for our higher education sector. There was a committee formed by MHRD where I was actually chairing that committee. We are looking at what are the new financial models for higher educational institutions, where these institutions don't have to depend solely on the government of India for funds, but also not burden the students by charging a high fee. So what can be the alternative paths for doing that? We looked at, for example, startups, the innovation. Now, can IIT start investing in the startup with the hope that some of these startups will become unicorns, the billion-dollar valued companies, and that equity that we hold, that can pay back for all the innovation ecosystem that we are building on the campuses. So we are looking at now IP licensing. Now, we are all filing now 150 patents. IIT Delhi in 2020, will file about 200 patents. In 2019, we filed 153 patents, and this year we will be filing 200 patents. But then, what do we do with all these patents? So, can we start earning revenues out of these licensing, and then can it help support, some of our education? So investing in the innovation space, with the hope that some of that investment will result in returns which are 1,000 times what we have invested. Like one unicorn coming out of our campus, if that institution holds 5% equity, you are talking of enough money to run the institution for the next few years. I think these are the new models that we need to develop. Talking about continuous kind of an assessment, which is what IITs have also been following. In IIT, for example, as a faculty member, we are told you need to do the in-semester assessments matter a lot. So it is not that you keep on collecting all the information and then and one fine day you go to the examination center and put it all out kind of a thing. I think that sort of a thing only tests your memory. So if you are doing a continuous kind of an assessment in IITs, we even have a rule that your end semester assessment cannot be for more than 40% weightage or 50% weightage. The remaining 50% needs to be tested during the semester through assignments, through quizzes, through whatever medium, whatever way you want to turn papers, whatever way you want to test it, you do it throughout the semester. The end semester can be for 40% kind of a weightage, and that is the way to do, because if you are testing memory of students, then you are not really they will forget it after the examination. Then you have forgotten everything, and that is not the way to do the assessment. So they are also saying do a continuous kind of an assessment, and which is again a very important thing. Indeed a great step. If you look at the funding today, where do we get much of our funding from Government of India? From agencies like Department of Science and Technology. DST is the agency which funds research in the academic institutions, but DST doesn't have problems of its own. DST gives you money, but DST doesn't give you problems to work on. So today, as a faculty member, when I look for funding, I come up with a problem, I go with a proposal to DST, and DST funds that project. And so therefore, there is a mismatch between the actual problem and the funding. So there is no agency in the country today which tells you that this is a problem that you need to solve and here is the money. There is no agency in India which is doing that. And who can do that? Only ministries can do that. You go to Ministry of Highways. Ministry of Highways, they have tons of problems. Now they have, in fact, we just signed an MOU with NHAI, and where they are generating so much of data now on the roads. The fast track schemes that they are able to implement, there is so much of data they are collecting now. Now, what do they do with that data? Now, NHAI came to us and said, all this data is available with us now, and now this is also the money that is available. Can your people help us, use this data effectively to reduce accidents on the streets or for better traffic monitoring, traffic planning? So that is the problem. That is the way we need to do research. So if these agencies come forward, start funding institutions now, not only with terms of money, but also in terms of giving the right set of problems to work on, and then things will become impactful in the society. The institutions will become visible to the society and impactful in the society. That is what we again need to do. What NRF is doing is precisely that. They are saying ministries will be connected with NRF. Ministries will pull in some money into NRF. So therefore, the ministries will give them the problems. NRF has sufficient funds. They are also increasing as part of NEP as a percentage of GDP. 6% is what the funding is going to be, with additional money, with the right set of problems that NRF will have now. So now you can do this grand challenge kind of project. So now, if you say that this is a grand challenge, you submit a proposal to solve this problem in the country. Then you mix now you match the problems with the funding, and that is how you provide solutions to the society. To me, NEP says God gets everything right. To me, it's all about implementation, which will differentiate how good is NEP.